we said that the Creator is perfection, real perfection, absolute perfection. We are put in this world to acquire for ourselves relative, finite, individual perfections. Now, he said two things about that. First of all, that anything that we think of as perfection is only relative and individual. When we say that something is perfect, what we mean is we can imagine various failures, various lacks, various unfinished elements, and this doesn't have them. So what we're really saying is this is better than something which would have X, Y, Z. We're making a relative judgment. But because Baruch Hu's perfection isn't like that. It isn't in comparison to anything else. It's absolute perfection. And I pointed out that this incompleteness in our idea could be understood in two different ways. Either I'm talking about a certain item of a certain category, a pencil, and I say that this is a perfect pencil. And somebody says, really? Perfect? Why do you say that? So listen, the lead is very strong, never breaks, and the point can be sharpened, very sharp, so you get a very sharp image, and it's very comfortable, and the eraser works completely well and completely and easily. It's a perfect pencil. And somebody says, would it be any better if the lead never ran out? Never? Could use it forever? Would it be better if the pencil, the wood out of which it was made, was inflammable, so it couldn't burn up in the fire? You say, well, gee, I didn't think of that, you know. I guess what I should say is it's a really good pencil, but it's not perfect. I mean, it could be improved, could have been better, right? So that's one way in which a person might say perfect and be short-sighted in meaning only, I have certain deficiencies in mind. What I mean is it doesn't have those deficiencies. It's not really perfect because it could be even better. That's one way it could be short-sighted. Another way it could be short-sighted is this. It's fireproof and waterproof, and the lead never runs out, and so on and so on. And somebody says, yeah, here, it's a really great pencil. But look, what do you want the pencil for? I want it for writing. Do you ever think of using a pen? Pens have all sorts of virtues, right? It's much more. It's solid. It's more can't scrape off. If you rustle the paper, it won't become dimmer and so on and so on. You know, so even though it may be a perfect pencil, it's not a perfect writing element. And since you're using it for writing, a superior writing element is superior to what you have. So these are two ways in which our judgment of perfection can be understood to be really only relative, not absolute. Yeah.
So one is that it is not perfect in its type, and the other that it's not perfect for its job.
That's right. Very good. Very good. Exactly. Now he's telling us when we mention perfection vis-a-vis the Creator, we mean absolute perfection with no comparison to anything else at all. Now, if I put that in positive terms, it might not be easy to understand or picture or define. But we could possibly put it in negative terms. The weakness in our conception of perfection, the weakness is that we don't realize that there are certain deficiencies even in the thing that we call perfect, from the two types that I gave you. If you say vis-a-vis the Creator, His perfection has no deficiencies at all of any kind, that already serves to set up the contrast. That serves to set up the contrast. Now, even our conceptions, when I look at the pencil and I say it's a perfect pencil and I'm making two types of mistakes, still, what motivates me to say perfect is because I am comparing it to something else that's more deficient. If I didn't have a concept of deficiency, I wouldn't have a concept of perfection. Perfection means lacking deficiency, either lacking relative deficiency, like in our concept, or lacking all deficiency in Kodesh Baruch Hu's concept. Then in a certain sense, you could say, well, when you're looking around and judging things and comparing things, talking about better and worse, and sometimes incautiously you will use the word perfect, what you're really relying on is a concept of deficiency and something like having no deficiencies. So in that sense, our relative misjudgments of perfection stem from this concept of God's perfection. He said that all finite perfections, limited perfections, comparative perfections, are like branches from a root, and the root is God's perfection. And you can understand this. I'm not saying this is the whole story, but this, at least in terms of definition and concept, you can understand why they're related in a natural way. That's one thing that we said. Okay. Now, so now he says, what's our position in this world? Now, you have to be very careful in this book, because when he makes a remark like this, you have to know that there are two periods of history. There's the state of Adam before he ate from the tree, while he was in the Garden of Eden, as God created him originally. That's one state. And there's the rest of history after that, which is a different state of being, a drastically different state of being. And I'm quoting now what he says in a later chapter, but I'm just giving background, because he's going to talk about what it was when it was originally created. If you don't know this, you could misunderstand it and read it as if we're talking about the world that we're familiar with. What happened when Adam and Chava, when they both ate from the tree of knowledge, is that there was a degradation of the whole creation. And one way to look at it schematically is this. The creation is divided between physical and spiritual, even before eating from the tree. There was something in that reality which counted as spiritual, and there was something in that reality that counted as physical. As a result of the transgression, the whole world went down a notch. So that, I'm doing this pictorially now, if the spiritual and the physical here, the world went down a notch so that what was physical before becomes its new ceiling. Physical, spiritual goes down to here, and the physical goes down to new territory, which didn't exist before. So everything's down a notch. And the original spiritual is out of touch. That means man's nature went down, the physical world went down, the mode of God's interaction with the world went down, everything went down a notch. Which means you now have a new reality. And in that new reality, circumstances are qualitatively different. So, just a couple of obvious examples. Adam was created as an adult. He had no parents. Didn't go through childhood. Since then, you new human beings come into the world through birth. There's a difference, a gigantic difference between the state of Adam as an adult on the one hand, and what we arrive at when we arrive at adulthood in our world on the other hand, because in Adam's case, which is what he's going to say now, when you look at his free will, it's equally balanced between good and evil. It's 50-50, which in a certain sense is the ideal condition for a fully responsible choice. In our world, choosing the numbers arbitrarily, it's 80-20 or 90-10 on the favor of evil. Because Adam was created in such a way that his involvement in the physical world was very, very minimal. He had no clothes and no need for clothes. He had no need for habitation. I don't know if you've heard of Guadalajara, but it's a city not far from Mexico City, which is called the land of eternal spring. It's always springtime. It's always moderate temperatures. It's always light breezes. It's always beautiful. I made a Shabbaton there many years ago. It's absolutely gorgeous. That's what's Gan Eden. Food was growing on the trees. So He was, a friend of mine in Toronto made a point to me a number of years ago. People say to you, why did God make a world in which there's death and disease and injury and natural disasters and so on? Why did he make a world with all that pain and suffering and destruction in it? The answer is he didn't. He didn't make that world. He made the world of Gan Eden. In Gan Eden there was no death, and there was no disease, and there was no injury, there was no destruction, there were no natural disasters, none of it. That's the world that he made. Adam and Chava, by performing the transgression, they were the ones who brought the world to the present state with all those terrible things in it. All you could ask about God is, why did he make a world which, if we fail, is going to develop in that way? But he didn't create that world. He didn't prefer that world. He preferred that we should have followed the instructions we were given and never have arrived at this reality. You can't put it at his doorstep, yeah.
So one problem with this that I tried to tackle was that the concept that everything is provided is kind of like a Russia's like way of living, where everything is just given to you. That's almost animalistic. That's how animals live their lives, where the food is just on the trees, and they don't toil for their food. Whereas that's part of what separates us humans is the toil that we have for our food, and we view that kind of positively now as a higher spiritual level than Russia's.
Yeah, well, I think that the key word that you're using, which shouldn't be used in the description, is for food. There is a group in a hotel in Ukraine who are working probably 20 hours a day, hacking Russian computer facilities. Right? Nobody asked them to go out and plant wheat for their food. No one asked them to go out and weave clothes for their clothing. They're hacking Russian sites to cripple the Russian government. They're working hard. They're under tremendous pressure. They're also in danger because if Russia will find out where they are, they'll bomb them right away. So it's not as if they're getting everything handed to them. It's just that what they have to do is work on hacking the Russian computer facilities. So here, Adam and Chava were facing a gigantic spiritual challenge. And that was a challenge that made them sweat, and indeed they failed it in the end. So it isn't that they were getting a free ride. They're getting a free ride from planting the soil. But that's not...
But they're involved in spiritual toil still.
Of course.
They're just not involved in physical toil.
And for us, the physical toil is only relevant because it's spiritual. Don't work on the farm on Shabbos. Don't plant two types of seeds together. Don't sew linen and wool together in your garments. Treat your animals in a certain way. All of it is because it's ultimately spiritual toil. The fact of physical toil makes no difference whatsoever. Imagine you see somebody who's counting the grains of sands on Jones Beach. Sorry, that's just a waste. It's just a waste. Very hard and difficult. Keeps track. And he's sweating. He's out in the sun. Waste. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. And guys lifting heavy weights, right? Just lifting heavy weights. Sorry. Physical toil for itself has no significance whatsoever. I don't respect that.
So it wasn't that they were automatically at their perfection.
By the way, this bears on something, a kind of mistake that is kind of often made. Isn't the responsibility of a man to work for a living? So I inherited $10 million, I better go to work. It's my responsibility to work for a living, not just inherit money. Dead wrong. You inherited $10 million, spend your day learning, spend your day teaching others, spend your day helping people in the hospital. Don't go to work. The Mesilas Yesharim says that the effort that we have to make to provide for ourselves in physical terms is a tax. It's a tax. Don't volunteer to pay taxes. No one should do that. The law is the law. When they ask you to pay tax, you pay the tax, but you don't volunteer to pay extra taxes.
Yeah, but I'm on a level just that toil generally in life struggle is part of the essence of our existence.
100%. But now you took out the word that I complained about. You didn't say physical now.
Yeah.
So I agree. Toil is very important, but not hoeing a row in the farm.
And then the ultimate toil is getting closer to Hashem, and that's really the essence of our purpose.
That's right. That's right.
But for an animal, the toil is.
What animal? You respect an animal that toils for its food?
No.
Not pitom. A sloth in Australia sleeps 16 hours a day, and the rest of the day it picks fruit from the tree and then goes back to sleep. I don't disrespect it. I don't feel that it's getting a free ride. It's an animal.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's okay.
I hope the point. I think the point's clear. Okay, so now he says, because now describing the situation in the Garden of Eden, this creature who's supposed to earn his own perfection is standing equally between perfection and deficiency. Now he says these two realities, perfection and deficiency, are consequences of the shining of God's presence versus the hiding of God's presence. When he, the creature, strengthens himself in acquiring some element of perfection for himself, then that root of God's shining his presence applies to him. And the more that he acquires perfection, the more he is attached to that element in God's presence. So that if he gets to the limit of human perfection, then he will get to the limit of the possibility of being attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu altogether. And then he's attached to him, and he is benefited by and enjoys God's goodness itself, and that itself adds perfection to him. Now, not because of what he's doing, but because of being connected to God. And because he did it by acquiring his own perfections, he's the one who's responsible for it. In that respect, we said the other day, he's like God, because God is what he is only because of himself. And here, because the human being uses his free will, then his own perfection is because of what he did. He himself is like God in being the author, the source of his own perfection. Limited as to the extent that it takes place. Now, I want to give you an example of this. The words that he's using fit Moses in a certain way. The source for what I'm saying now is, there's a commentary called Meshech Chochmah, written by the man for whom this yeshiva is named, Meir Simcha Midvinsk. He wrote a commentary on the Chumash called Meshech Chochmah. In his introduction to his section on Shmos, on Exodus, he says the following. We are in a situation, like you said before, of struggle. We struggle because we have a good inclination and an evil inclination, and they're in conflict with one another, and we have to make right choices. And those right choices lead us to do things that are right and to build ourselves in a way that's more consistent with the right. And the more we succeed, the higher we raise ourselves. The difference between us and all other creatures is that we are self-creative in this way of facing the conflict between good and evil and struggling to make the right choice. What would happen? What would be the result, the value of the result, if a person so consistently made the struggle and won the struggle that he got to the point where he trained himself and purified himself so that the evil inclination no longer opposed the good. The evil inclination was tamed and trained like a wild horse. You don't shoot wild horses. You tame them and ride them, and they become exquisite servants for the rider. You tame it, and it's your ally, in which case you lose your free choice. You lose your free choice. Is that a valuable outcome? Or Is it contradicting the purpose of human life? As long as you're alive, you should be making choices. You should be straining and struggling. The balance should be there so that you can go either way. And each new choice you make adds more perfection to you. Is it a valid goal to get to a position in this world where you're no longer making free choices? Now, of course, I'm describing a case where you use your free choices to get to the position where you don't use it anymore. Not talking about being dragged along free. But is that a valuable outcome or not? I think the answer is not obvious. But the Meshech Chochmah says, word for word, that it is the most valuable possible outcome. And he quotes the Rambam, something which I had read the Rambam many times, but I didn't pay attention. Rambam, in the 8th chapter of the Fundamentals of Torah, describes Moses, and twice he uses the word angel for Moses. He directly compares Moses to angels. So the Meshech Chochmah says, that's not a joke. This is the Rambam. This isn't just entertaining poetry. If the Rambam uses that word, he means it. And what happened is that he got to the point where he purified the evil inclination, which for us is largely identified with the body. He purified the body to the point where the body no longer opposes the soul, where the body becomes the ally of the soul. And the result of that is that he loses free will and achieves the status of an angel in this world. And by the way, this author, the Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his famous book, the Mesilas Yesharim, The Path of the Just, in the last chapter, chapter 26, says the same thing, that a great person, a great pious person, can achieve the status of an angel in this world. So that's a great, great accomplishment. Now, what happened to Moses as a result of that? Well, one thing that happened was, when he taught Torah, the rabbinic description of him was, Shechina medaberes mitoch grono. God's presence spoke from his throat. That's an astonishing statement. It doesn't mean he was faithful and careful and pious and committed and so on and so on. No, it means he wasn't there. He wasn't speaking. God's presence was speaking from his throat. He made himself into a vessel for God's will to act itself in the world, so much so that it didn't get filtered through him. He made himself totally transparent as a vehicle for God's voice. One exquisite explanation of this, and as explained by the Pri Tzaddik, is this. The Gemara says that Moses' prophecy is different from all other prophets. Prophets see God through a lens, so to speak, not direct, but mediated. All the others see God through a obscured lens, obscured in some way or other, not a completely transparent lens. Moses saw God through a completely transparent lens. Even Moses needed some kind of intermediary, but it was completely transparent. Now, what's the difference between transparent and not transparent? What is the barrier to the transparency? So the Pri Tzaddik gives the following analogy. Imagine that you are in a room at night with windows out to the street, and there's a light on in the room, and you're looking out the window towards the street. As you know from experience, you will see two things in the window pane. First of all, you'll see the street, but you'll also see a partial reflection of the room. And that's why your vision of the street is obscured to a certain extent, because there are two images that you get from the window pane. Now imagine you're standing directly opposite the window. So it's like your vision angle to the window is 90 degrees. So when you see the reflection of the room, what do you see?
Yourself.
You see yourself. That's what gets in the way. What gets in the way of your vision is yourself. You cloud the vision. You make it distorted. For Moses' vision was pure because there was no self there. He got to the point where there was no self. That is the highest possible achievement that a human being can have. This is part of what we read about Moses and on the mountain, where he was there 3 times for 40 days and nights. They didn't eat and didn't drink. And by the way, did he sleep? Ask this to people who wear black hats. How do you know he didn't sleep? You're reading my voice. Which isn't a bad thing to do either, huh?
Days and nights.
It says he was there for days and nights. You could be there and sleep. He has to say, I didn't eat food, I didn't drink water. Right? He has to tell us that. But in the middle one, where he prayed for the Jewish people for 40 days and nights, it says he prayed 40 days and nights. And you can't pray when you're sleeping. Right? So what's going on? What's going on is that his body is no longer functioning the way bodies normally function. Now I want to ask you a question. 40 days and nights. The world's most extreme crash diet. Did he come down as a scarecrow? Skin and bones? Did he lose weight? I don't think so. But how could he not lose weight? So the answer is because for him, learning Torah nourished him. What do you mean learning Torah nourished him? Learning Torah doesn't have calories. Yeah, it doesn't have calories. But his body was so connected to his soul that when his soul was receiving Torah, that nourished the body also. That nourished the body also. So we're talking about a very unique position that Moses had. And that's what you can achieve if you use your free will. Of course, this is relative and it's partial for other people. Other people can climb up the ladder to a certain extent. So the 50-50 is the ideal starting point. It doesn't follow that it's the ideal continuous point until you die. That doesn't follow. Because your own spiritual development can change the balance. That's the lesson we're getting from here, yeah.
So you said his body was so connected to his soul, and I'm wondering why...
I don't think I used the word connected. I said it was in tune with. It's in tune with his soul. Two things to be connected and not be in tune.
So it was... I'm just wondering, is it like the soul took over the body, or that the soul was almost disconnected from the body was irrelevant, or no. If the body's irrelevant, then if the body's irrelevant to the soul, that doesn't mean the soul's in tune with the body. The body's in tune with the soul at all. That's that.
No. And for him, the one name of the entire project is to elevate the body to make it soul-like. That's one name.
It's like the soul takes over the body.
That's right. Takes over the characteristics of the body. It absorbs for itself the characteristics of the body. That's right. Okay, so this is how he describes the initial state. Right, and now, now we talked about benefiting from God's infinite goodness. Think of Moses. Moses is now just a vessel in God's hands that God uses to make things happen in the world. You couldn't possibly have greater benefit from God than that. He's using you to do His will in the world. And you get credit for it because you brought it about that He should be using you. By the way, I told you yesterday about the guy who had to pilot the plane down, was talked down by the I was talking to this group. So it just happened. It just happened yesterday in Florida. The guy was up in a Cessna, and the pilot suddenly underwent some kind of seizure and became incoherent. And the passenger said, they were in touch with the tower, said, I have a problem. He's not driving, and I have no idea how to drive a plane. And they talked him down. They gave him instructions what to do, and he landed the plane.
Wow. He
actually landed the plane. Happened yesterday. That's my illustration of paying attention. You bet he paid attention. He didn't get distracted. It really mattered what he heard. He followed the instructions down to the line, his tiniest detail, because it's life or death. Now, this is the way in which a person can be in touch with God. But when you get to the point where God says, okay, I'll take over for you because you've put yourself in my hand, there's nothing higher than that. Now, I don't know if you know about microsurgery, but microsurgery has been in the past extremely difficult because the hand of the surgeon has to make extremely tiny motions. They have a much easier way to do it now. Your hand motions as a surgeon are attached to a robot, and when you move your hand an inch, it moves a millionth of an inch. It just takes your motion and reduces it. So you can make the robot move as small an amount as you want without you straining your muscles and your coordination, right? And that's the way they do some microsurgery, right? So now you say, well, that machine is great because a surgeon is manipulating it to do microsurgery, you know? If you have it stirring drinks, it wouldn't be nearly so significant a machine, right? So I said, what can I do? Well, if I make myself into the kind of thing which God wants to use to have things happen in the world, there's nothing greater than that. There's nothing greater than that. Yeah.
How practical do you think if it actually reached that level?
So okay. So I said before, but I didn't stress it. We're talking now about a person who reached the top.
Yeah.
But each one of us can make a step up the ladder, and God's use of you, God's manipulation of your circumstances will change as you take steps up the ladder. If you have a certain position, He'll give you certain choices. When you climb up, He'll give you other choices, which are more significant, more powerful. It's a general rule. Now, of course, when I say general rule, I mean exactly what I say. It doesn't mean universal rule. Our rules almost always have exceptions. But it's a general rule that God sets up a situation for you, and then you have to make a response. It's not that He pushes you into it. Very rare. There's a story of someone who's alive today, which is really astonishing, but this has really happened. It happened in London about 40 years ago, maybe now 50 years ago. He was 8 years old, and he had two older sisters who made his life difficult for him. You could probably imagine that. And one day he went up to his room, he was crying. They did something to disturb him. And he's crying, and he comes from a Sephardi family, a wealthy Sephardi family. So because he comes from a Sephardi family, he believes in God, and knows there's a God, and knows there's a Torah, and so on and so on. So they don't keep everything, okay? They have their challenges. He says, God, I can't take this. My life is really miserable. I can't take this. And I know what I need. I need a baby brother. 8 years old. I need a baby brother. Please, give me a baby brother. And then he says, you know, anybody could have a baby brother by accident. If you'll have him be born on my birthday, then I'll know he's coming from you. And I make a promise to you that if that happens, then I will study your laws and your books. I know we're not living up to a lot of what you want, and I'll try to do what you want us to do. So a year or so later, a baby boy his mother gave birth to a baby boy a week off his birthday. Okay, here's the parting of the paths. Say, listen, you're God. You're all-powerful. You have total control. A week off is a week off. Sorry, no cigar, no prize. Or, I got it, it could have not happened at all. It could have happened 6 months ago. A week, I'm not going to worry about a week. I get the message, I hear you, and he then started to become serious. When he became 11, 12, he said to his father, look, it's coming time for my bar mitzvah. I want a real bar mitzvah. Not the show bar mitzvah that we have. Get me a real teacher. So he got him a real Jewish teacher in Golders Green. He's going to the rabbi. After a few weeks, the rabbi says to him, why are you coming to me? You come from a certain population, you have your own rabbis, you have your own customs, and so forth and so on. Why are you coming to me for preparation? So the boy tells the rabbi the story. Fine. It's once a week sessions. It comes back the next week. The rabbi says, I have a surprise for you. You say that your baby brother was born a week off your birthday because you looked at the English calendar. You look back at the Jewish calendar, you'll see he was born on your birthday. Would it surprise you to hear that this boy is frum today? He's religious, and he lives a religious life, right? But now, suppose you're taking the other path. No, a week is a failure. It means nothing, and it could happen by accident, and you're all powerful if you want to do it. Then he never would have found out that it was exact. He never would have discovered that it was exact. Here's where God says, I'm offering you my hand, but you have to take it. I'm not pushing you into it. You have to take it. Now, if you think back in life, the times when you had decisions to make, and you made a decision, and other people didn't make that decision, one of which is whatever brought you here now, where almost all of the people whom you know have never, and the way they're living now, will never set their feet in a place like this, and you ended up here for 5 minutes. I don't care how long you're here for. So you took an opportunity that other people don't take. This was an opportunity that God gave, and you took it. So this is the way God deals with us. He gives us these opportunities, but He wants a response from our side. Rarely will He push us into something. It may happen, but rarely does it happen. Okay, so then the answer is that you end up attached to God, and you benefit then from His greatness because of that relationship that you have with Him, that He guides your life in such a way as to bring you to the greatest possible spiritual fulfillment. Now, so now, the creature that is designed to have this struggle and to create its own various perfections and to attach itself to the Creator, that creature is the purpose of the entire creation. And everything else that exists will only be something that's made to help him in this process, in some way or other. And therefore they're called secondary to this particular creature. The creature that was created for this purpose is the humanity. By the way, just as a matter of vocabulary, I almost said it, and that's why I caught myself. I don't think the word species should ever be used in translating any Hebrew word. There's absolutely no reason to think that the modern biological concept of species, and that's a misnomer, there are at least 10 such concepts which are used fortuitously whenever it's necessary to say what you want to say, without care and without citing that they're redefining things as they go along. The biologists are quite sloppy about that. But there's no Hebrew word which corresponds to any of the modern biological meanings of the word species. When people hear the word species, they think biology, so it should not be used. The word min, men, yud, nun, should be translated as category or group, but not species. So I say humanity without saying the word species. Humanity is a group, and it's defined by its characteristics. Yeah.
Sorry, if you don't want me, I won't continue on this topic. It's just in the Torah, in the Causation, it talked about not mixing species. And
No, it doesn't say species at all.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering.
Absolutely not. It's not mixing groups. There's a Rashi that says that in terms of plants, two things can be of the same min, even though they don't look similar and they don't behave in the same way. So that, and for plants, that's how you would classify species. So it's just not right. It's not right.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
What it would be called in Hebrew.
I don't think we have an English word for it. I don't know how to define it in Hebrew. I think what you have to have is, the tradition has to tell you in specific cases what count as members of the same min, and it may be quite surprising to a person the way it works out, because it's not the same categories that we use. Okay, now he ends the chapter with the following words. We were talking very abstractly about things that count as, contribute to perfections, and things that count as or contribute to deficiencies. So he now gives them general items in each category. Good character traits. Intellectual talent, virtues, intellectual accomplishment, and good character traits. Those are the elements of perfection by which various different perfections are achieved and defined for people, and physicality and bad character traits, those are the ones that embody, promote deficiency, and that's where man is put. Man is put between intellectual qualities and good character traits on the one hand, and physicality and bad character traits on the other hand. And these are the choices that he has to make. Now, it's not exactly obvious why intellectuality is opposed to physicality. In our vocabulary, the opposition to physical is spiritual. Spiritual does not limit it just to the intellect. So we'll have to understand as we go through the Sefer why exactly these particular two categories are chosen. And I'll just start with the beginning of an explanation. In the later chapter, Ramchal defines service of God in the following terms. Service of God means turning towards God and seeking to become closer to Him and to become attached to Him. Okay, becoming closer and becoming attached is what we've spoken about throughout this chapter. Dveikus, attachment to God, is the purpose of the entire process. But what's this idea of turning towards Him? Now, on the most elementary level, if the instruction is turn towards God, that means you're facing in the wrong direction. Turn around. Why is that? Why am I facing in the wrong direction? It's assumed I'm facing in the wrong direction. Always? So that every time when I say to myself, I have to serve God, the first step in serving God is, why is that?
Because you're looking at yourself.
Okay, it's a good try. I don't think that's right. I think, and this is what I'm appealing to now, what he says, I think the purpose of this is in the literature, vastly, the purpose of the material world is to hide God's presence. That's its purpose. It creates powerful, hypnotic, false images that draw in a person that he identifies with, that he takes for granted, is his environment, is his context, and they hide God's presence. And he has to turn away from them. Here's just a little example. I'm sure that every one of you is as hypnotized as everybody else by cause and effect. Why did it fall? It fell because I let go of it and gravity pulls it down. That's what things do, which are unsupported in the presence of a gravitational field. No, it didn't really fall for that reason. You can say the words, but you can't convince yourself of it. Of course that's why it happened. Why does this make a sound? Because I created vibrations in the wood, and the wood makes vibrations in the air. It's carried to your eardrums, and that's what you hear. What if I told you there's no such thing as causation? It's just an illusion. It's a mistake. You would know what to do with my words. Well, then where's my world go? My world is causation. Why is this table here? The answer is very simple. This table is here because it was here yesterday and nobody moved it. And so it was the day before or the day before. It still exists because nobody burned it up, nobody chopped it up. Right? That's why. The Jewish position is that's wrong. That's wrong. You say every morning, twice, before you say the Shema, that God is constantly making the work of creation. Mechadesh, tuvo, ma'aseh b'rishos, tomid. Without his constant input of divine energy, nothing would exist. There is no inertia to existence. It doesn't exist because it existed before and nothing destroyed it. No, something has to prop it up. It doesn't look that way. No scientist will find that in his telescope or microscope. It's just that the world isn't the way it looks to us. You can't help. This is the difference between us and Adam. When you grow up as a child, you're totally dependent on your physical circumstances, and you learn to manipulate them, including manipulating your parents, who are part of your physical circumstances. Babies are born with that tremendous repertoire of manipulations, like screaming and so forth and smiling, as you will find out if you don't already know. And you grow up where your whole well-being in your experience depends upon your physical circumstances. It's cold! Close the window, and then you won't be cold. Everything's like that. Now you're being told it's all an illusion, and you have to relate to God, do something in His name, with him in mind, you have to turn away from the physical. He said, turn away from the physical. That's why the physical is the spiritual enemy. It's a spiritual enemy because it hides God's presence and it makes it very difficult to attach yourself mentally to God because you don't see God in the physical. Not only you don't see God in the physical, but you see lots of other things that look completely real without taking God into account. And it's the intellect, ultimately, that enables you to turn away from the physical. We're not talking now about taking a pill, a psychedelic pill, or hypnotizing yourself, or starving yourself so that you have visions. No, we're talking about understanding that the physical isn't what it appears to be. Similar to when you are taught that the table is almost all empty space, more than 99% of the table is empty space, and you say, gee, it doesn't look that way, and they say, grow up. Don't be taken in by the way it appears. You're not 6 years old. You can learn that things aren't the way it appears. Is the earth in motion? Surely not. I'm sitting on it. I know it's not in motion. No! It's moving through the galaxy, and it's rotating on its axis, and it's revolving around the sun. It's in various motions all the time. Don't pay attention to your gross senses. Think yourself into the reality. Gotcha. I hear you. Okay, I take that as a responsibility. You're absolutely right. That's the message the Torah has, but it's not easy. Not easy. It's the intellect that enables you to see through the false veneer of the physical. It enables you to follow the instruction, turn towards God. That's where the physical and the intellectual are opposed and how they interact. One has to overcome the other in order to achieve the good. This is one of many interactions. But I'm just explaining a little bit why Ramchal says on the good side you have the intellect and good character traits, and on the bad side you have the physical and bad character traits. Good and bad character traits correspond. Intellectual and physical don't obviously correspond. I'm explaining to a little extent why they correspond. Okay?